It is late on March 21st. Returning to the book of Ezra, we are in chapter 5, verse 4. In the context, beginning of chapter 5 is the prophets Haggai and Zechariah coming to push forward the project that had been stalled in chapter 4 because the representatives of the king of Persia and so forth. Been there again. Verse 4, who wants to read?
Then we said to them, "What are the names of the men who are engaged in the building?" But God watched over the elders of the Jews, and they were not stopped, while a report went to Darius, and a letter was sent back in reply to it. Good.
So this is now when the work is stopped, and the work isn't stopped. The work has restarted at the prompting of the prophets. And this Tatanai, who we actually know, we have documents, I believe, from Persepolis, which was the capital of the Persian Empire, with the name of Tatanai as being the governor from the other side of the river. I haven't done much by way of vetting this handout. I cleaned it up a little bit, but it's essentially the chart from Wikipedia, but at least as a place to start.
Thank you.
And so Tatanai as a governor is known, which is nice. It's an extra biblical source for a character in the Bible. But this time, so they come and they say, who gave you permission to do this? That's verse 3. That's where we ended last time. Verse 4 is, who are the men who are building it? It has the sense for me of Hoover's men taking pictures of cars out in the parking lot. Right? Who's doing this? I want to know. We're writing down names. And by the way, think back to where we were in the earlier chapter, where we had this long list of names in chapter 2.
Yeah,
right?
You can turn to the book and you will find the names.
You don't need a new list.
Us for?
We have the original list of who did it. So they're concerned about the names and who's doing it. But the big difference between the first time, there really are two differences, I think, from what we read before and what we read now, is, first of all, before, that story comes in the aftermath of the community turning down those who come to help. And just in terms of the narrative context, that's very interesting. Nothing like that happens here. And second, this time, when they're concerned about it and they send letters off to do it, the work continues. The work isn't held in abeyance. And why is that true this time? According to the text?
God's eyes on them. God watches over them.
Right. So this time, now why this time and not that time, don't know.
It's so interesting that the point of view here is from the people who want to stop it. אז אמרנו להם.
Correct.
And Elohehem hayta. And even that is from the point of view of the people who are against
the officials of the Persian Empire is the
all of a sudden the
text.
Point of view is so interesting.
And it's also, I think it's really interesting. We have the addition of Haggai and Zechariah, but I would imagine that the group that comes back from Bavel would be burning with fury to get the job done. And they get it started right away and so forth, and then they're told to stop, and they say, okay. And then they stop for decades. And this group is the group that accomplishes it. So whether it is because more have come, is there a second wave of return, or for whatever reason, but it's not the initial group or the initial building project. It's a second one. All right, now we have a copy. Anything else there? Anybody want to add any piece to that? All right, verse 6. This is the text of the letter. Who would like to read?
This is the text of the letter that Atanai, governor of the province of beyond the river, and Shetar-Bozenai and his colleagues, the officials of beyond the river, sent to King Darius. They sent a message to him, and this is what was written in it. To King Darius, greetings, and so forth.
What's so forth?
No.
Shlama chola. Kol hashalom. a big shalom, and so forth.
Yada
That
yada.
means like etc.
etc., etc.
I know what it means, but it doesn't say
doesn't
it in
say.
Aramaic.
Be it known to the king that we went to the province of Judah, to the house of the great God.
Oh, if I could just interrupt for a second. So, Shlama Chola. So some kind of like complete peace be upon you.
Yeah, the whole, the big piece. Yeah.
It's only because of the timeliness of it. An unrelated digression, if I can leap forward. What am I leaping forward? 6 centuries, give or take. We have had in our tradition for 2,000 years, the Sabbath before Passover has a special name. That Sabbath is really important in the New Testament because it's related to the last days, though the Gospels don't all agree on how Passover works related to Jesus' end. But none of the 4 Gospels know how to translate Shabbat HaGadol.
Shabbat HaGadol, what do they do then?
They call it for that Sabbath was a great Sabbath, but they don't, which is really ironic, by the way, because especially for John, for the Gospel of John, because Shabbat HaGadol could fit so beautifully into Christian theology because it's about impending redemption. So, it works really well for Messiah stuff. But already in an Aramaic world, and in a world moving away from its Jewish origins, the Gospel authors have no clue what to do with the Great Sabbath, and at least the translators have no clue what to do. I don't want to claim. You can read the context of the Gospel authors, but the translators from King James forward have no clue what it is, and it's hysterical to look at. And it's obvious what it is, whether they get it right or not. It's the Sabbath before Passover, and that's just the name for the Sabbath before Passover. Now the reasons for it, but anyway, fun stuff. Somebody else's Bible. So I enjoy that there seems to be a translation problem with Shlama Chola.
It is being rebuilt of hewn stone, and wood is being laid in the walls. The work is being done with dispatch and is going well. Thereupon we directed this question to these elders.
Can you stop for a minute and read again that verse? The English verse. Something about the wood and whatever. This is how it starts?
It starts, be it known to the king.
Me in the middle of the verse. It starts with, be it known to the king that we went to the province of Judah, to the house of the great God.
Okay.
It is being rebuilt of hewn stone, and wood is being laid in the walls. The work is being done with dispatch and is going well.
All right. So a couple of things, by the way. There's nothing in the initial part of the letter, we'll get to the rest of the letter, that makes it sound like insurrection. It's really fun to see from the Edict of Cyrus forward how God is identified, right? So here we have the great God. By the way, the adjective great is a nice adjective. You can see down the list of the titles of the kings that they are great kings, so I assume in Aramaic they are also Malka Rabbah. So that this is the great God, or the house of the great God. Okay, sorry, Bill, I interrupted you.
You say kings are also identified like that?
Yeah, if you look on the chart that I gave you,
Oh, I didn't see that, yeah.
that the kings, the great and powerful, oh, that was Oz, but the Persian kings are called the great king.
I wonder if that's the term for emperor, as Melech HaMelachim.
Maybe, but they're also called Melech HaMelachim.
It's not the same as Eloha Rabbah.
No, but Bill's comment is whether or not Malka Rabbah is a parallel to Malka Malchaya, which I think is what it is in Aramaic. And so what's interesting, if you just look down the list, is the number of kings, Persian kings, who according to Wikipedia, again, I haven't fully vetted this, who are called both Malka Rabbah and Malka Malchaya.
I would just point one thing out that may have nothing to do with anything, which is typical, but we do use honorable a lot in American government, the honorable justices of the Supreme Court, and that's just common practice to call them that, or you write to a state legislator, the honorable, and still give them the title. So perhaps it was.
Look, there was a time where reverend was a more generic honorific rather than a specific clergy title. The idea of calling you rabbi or reverend cracks me up, but it was.
100 years ago in Britain,
Less than that here.
Yeah, it's still a title for some. It's not. Yeah,
But the thing was that
reverend,
in Britain, the Orthodox rabbinate only ordained like 3 rabbis for the country, and everyone else that headed up congregations, they didn't want to give the power to create more rabbis to these guys, so they called them reverends. So if you look at some of the great Jewish writers 100 years ago in Britain, they are Reverend, Chaim Solomon and so forth.
And it looks so funny in today's world where Reverend is clearly a title of Christian clergy and not a more general honorific.
Yes.
All right, William, you've been interrupted now again. Verse 9.
Okay, I'll try. Thereupon we directed this question to these elders: who issued orders to you to rebuild this house and to complete its furnishings? We also asked their names so that we could write down the names of their leaders for your information. This is what they answered us: we are the servants of the God of heaven and earth. We are rebuilding the house that was originally built many years ago. A great king of Israel built it and completed it.
Okay, so now we have the first part of their answer, but it's their answer as reported in the letter written by the governor of the province of Judea, right, or from beyond the river.
By the way, do we know for sure that that beyond the river meant beyond the Jordan, or could it be beyond the Euphrates? In other words, is this size of a province or this size of a province?
Well, Darius, I'm pretty sure. I don't presume that the capital is in Babylon. So that from Iran, I almost wonder if we're talking about the Persian Gulf. What body of water are we crossing? But I would say most likely would be the Jordan River. Seems to make the most sense. Okay. But there may be other parallels in Persian documents.
Would make just as much sense, because it was a bigger river.
Okay. So should I continue?
So again, title of God. Now this is the appointees quoting what the Jews say, but God is referred to as the God of heaven and earth, a universal title, a title that probably has direct parallels in terms of Persian theology, honorific of their own history, right, built by a great king. And now verse 12 is one of those great 12s. I believe, well, go ahead.
But because our fathers angered the God of heaven, he handed them over to Nebuchadnezzar the Chaldean, king of Babylon, who demolished this house and exiled the people to Babylon. Okay,
so before they get, let's sit in exile for a minute before we get to do the return. We have a clear theological statement, or a double theological statement. What theological realities are reflected in that verse? When, again, the Jews are being quoted by the Persian governor, but what's the theology that's present there related to the destruction of the first temple?
Jews angered their government.
Good one is
the power of God versus Nebuchadnezzar. Even, I mean, it's not Nebuchadnezzar. God.
Outstanding. Yeah. So both of those are true, right? One is, and it's kind of an internal read, is the theology that they deserved it. We upset God, and God punished us. So there's the theology that is a classic theology throughout the Deuteronomistic history, from Deuteronomy through 2 Kings, part of the world of the chroniclers, of both chronicles, and here stated here in one verse in a letter from a Persian governor, but quoting Jews saying that this is why we did. And the external read of it is that the Nebuchadnezzar didn't do it. Our God was not defeated in the great battle between Marduk and Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Marduk didn't win. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh won, right? But winning is an odd thing when you're fighting against your own people, right? But you have understand that statement with the double theology, the internal theology that this is why it happened to us, and the broader external theology that the God of heaven and earth is still the God of heaven and earth. Didn't become a minor deity after the destruction.
My God's bigger than your God.
I know, but my God's unhappy with me, so I almost wish my God was smaller.
Right, and I don't want to keep messing it up.
Continue.
S'il vous plaît.
But in the first year of King Cyrus of Babylon, King Cyrus issued an order to rebuild this house of God. Also the silver and gold vessels of the house of God that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem and brought to the temple in Babylon, King Cyrus released them from the temple in Babylon to be given to the one called Sheshbazzar, whom he had appointed governor.
All right, pause you again. Comments?
I wonder where these vessels are at this point.
Correct. So you just jump forward 2,500 years, Bill.
No. I mean, when I say at this point, I mean
there.
in the story. I mean, if the house has not been built yet, and in fact they had to wait.
The caretaker?
They had to take a 20-year hiatus, a 25-year hiatus. Where did they put that stuff?
What stuff?
The treasures.
The vessels,
the silver and gold
silver
vessels of the house of
that
God.
had been taken from the house of God and taken to Babylon and were now returned.
Wherever they lived, they must have had some storage space.
So, by the way, really, really fun and relevant to this question in this verse is the history of the Aleppo Codex. A community that has a treasure and has it in its right place, and the security measures, in a pre-Fort Knox world. And then what happens when the synagogue is destroyed for the periods of time before it makes its way to the state of Israel. Fascinating stuff. I'm also curious that I wanted to check the list in terms of Cyrus, king of Babylon. Right? It's not normally how we identify Cyrus. Right? It's kind of fun. Man of many titles.
But God's not in this now. Now it's all Cyrus. by
Yeah,
himself.
they are
Doesn't
not
say great
repeating that it's God's.
And they the great king.
It's God's plan. Koresh issued the
Nice.
edict. Interesting. Either they think that the story clearly indicates who's causing all this to happen, like when God put them in the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, or for whatever reason, either the quoters or the quoted got tired
Right.
of mentioning God all the time.
Maybe.
No, because it's clear, even in the edict, the way it's quoted in the book, it says that God made him do it. So for some reason, the fact that they omit the mention of God, or at least quoted as omitting the mention of God, is quite a significant omission.
I agree. And I think the switch from Cyrus of Persia to Cyrus of Babylon is also... Compare this text to Ezra 1, or to the Second Chronicles, or to Malachi. I'm sorry, not Malachi, Isaiah,
So
where we have
almost like a tacit, our God made Nebuchadnezzar do what he did for Cyrus.
Is there any discussion? There must be of
Yeah,
how that affects the
exactly.
morality of the act of Nebuchadnezzar and doing what he did. The fact that he was an instrument.
It's an issue
morality.
in the Talmud. The
Koba, I
Talmud
want to
deals
hear
with the
your
issue.
comment, please.
All right. Hold the thought.
Yeah, I was just interested. What?
Yeah, I'll get there 1 second. But
Yeah, go ahead.
Koba.
I lost him, I'm sorry.
Well, if I can respond, I think, to what Kova said. I mean, these are people who are writing, or the Jews, in telling their story, are in fact appealing to the Persian authorities. And you don't, you may say that Nebuchadnezzar won because our God was really ticked off at us, so he manipulated this and this. But if you're appealing to the Persian authorities, you don't say, and in fact, our God is telling your president or your king
Correct.
or whatever to do all this wonderful
it's
stuff.
easy to say Nebuchadnezzar was a puppet of God.
Yes.
But you don't want to say, and by the way, Almighty Cyrus, to whom we owe our allegiance, you're also a puppet of God.
Yeah.
That's not so...
But then
That's
it
not
even
politics.
double kind of confusing that they appeal to the Persian king by saying Cyrus, king of Babylon.
That's fascinating.
Shouldn't they be even more careful in how they address that king?
Yes, but on the other hand, they're writing all this in Aramaic, and there is this tacit understanding that he is, by acquiring the whole Babylonian...
Then he is already the king of Persia, but we mentioned that he took over from Nebuchadnezzar, who used to be the king of Babylon, and now he's the king over him. Yeah.
I also...
Yeah.
Just something to pay attention to as we see kings being referred to. The text in Ezra 1 Koresh is called, and we're in Hebrew, not in Aramaic, is called Melech Paras. And the text that we just read in Ezra 5 has a participle. He's called Malka Di Bavel, not Malka. So it may be that he's actually in Bavel, and so they're writing this letter to him, who's the king, literally in Bavel at that point. I don't know, but it'd be interesting to see how the Aramaic uses in terms of the country.
Dramatic, say Malka Bavel. In Hebrew, you can say Melech Bavel because it's Nichut. Malka Bavel doesn't work in Aramaic.
So I want to see if we can find it.
Interesting.
I don't know if they have Snichut or not, but that's not the way it works. Malka Di Bavel is the way Aramaic would say Melech Bavel.
Reserve the right to look for the references, the other references to how kings are, because I think it is very, very striking. But Ezra doesn't have Welsh.
Stay.
So interesting to Harvey's comment is the Talmud deals with the question not only about Nebuchadnezzar, but also about Nebuchadnezzar, about if he's God's puppet, then why is he to blame? And the same thing, the question will be asked as it relates to the second destruction. If
why, who? Nebuchadnezzar?
Yeah.
What do you mean to blame? To blame for what?
Well, because he's called Nebuchadnezzar Rasha, but if he's God's puppet, it's kind of like the issue around hardening Pharaoh's hardening. That thing, this organ.
They have a ready-made answer for that, exactly the same one they used for Sancheriv. They have it ready-made in their pocket to put out in your face whenever you come up with a question. Because they all get too big for their britches. One and all. And I can prove it to you from every case in the Bible that there is a Matehu Biyad Za'ami. They use the term even. He is a stick or a whatever, a battering ram. Not battering ram is kind of confusing metaphors. You know what I'm saying? They are all instruments of God, and they all get too big for their britches. And that's why they get punished.
They all get to be what?
Too big for their britches. So again, but the question will be asked and dealt with in the Talmud as it relates to why.
Nobody can live with prosperity.
Right, in the same way that next week, we have to deal with the question of the hardening of Pharaoh's heart, which is a serious issue for the Meforshim,
That's a tough
right?
one.
Because it's one thing it's one thing to harden his heart and to go from blood to frogs, but the context and to read the text very, very carefully will take us all the way through to the 10th plague and all that it means. So it's a fascinating text, and the commentary to it and the reading of the text is good.
Getting to it in Sanhedrin?
No. In Pesach. All right. Verse 15. Jack, you want to read? That way I don't interrupt Bill anymore.
15?
Yes, please.
He said to him, "Take these vessels, go deposit them in the temple in Jerusalem, and let the house of God be rebuilt on its original site."
Boom. So there is a version of the Edict of Cyrus as it relates specifically to this. You can go and compare that to what's said in Ezra 1 and what's said in Isaiah and what's said in Chronicles. It speaks generically of gold and silver, and it speaks about the vessels. What does it not mention specifically?
Walls?
No.
The extra money that was sent?
The top, what's the pinnacle of the treasure?
The ark.
The ark. The ark is not referred to in any way. Right? I mean, maybe it's in the collective, in the treasure, whatever else, but for the ark hunters in there, it's a delicious, delicious silence. I don't know what to make of it. All right.
Who is Sheshbazzar? He's the leader of the ones that came back.
Sheshbazzar was if you go back, he was the original leader, as opposed to, it's there in verse 8, chapter 1, verse 8, and maybe that may not be the first mention, as opposed to, if you jump forward to chapter 3, we have Zerubbabel.
Yep.
So we have subsequent generations of descendants of David who are leaders of the people. I think so. It's it's worth checking me on it because
No, I don't remember where he is.
Prince of Judah, chapter 1, verse 8.
Oh, wow.
So as opposed to Prince of Egypt.
שש בצר הנשיא ליהודה, wow.
Yeah. So the people are still led by Davidic royalty, but which understand in the context of the issue of rebellious nature of these people and what is the nature of what they're doing and so forth. There's royal lineage there.
But there's a very interesting addition here that's not mentioned in Ezra 1, that Koresh made Shesh Batzar a pasha, or whatever you call it in English. I don't know what the translation is. He made him an official of the
Correct, he
state,
appointed him governor.
of the king, the governor. Pecha Samo. Pecha Sameh. We don't know that from Ezra. We know that they return and Nasi Yehuda. So maybe, Nasi Yehuda sounds like it's an honorific within the clan. But here he becomes an official of Cyrus.
Correct, he gets a title of the kingdom, of the Persian kingdom.
And what a title.
Good job.
That's exactly an equivalent of the titles of the guys who wanted to stop the building.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like on a chessboard, he is exactly the equivalent of the white and the black.
Correct.
They are right
But
one against the other.
But the people who come to stop, I think, were already in the world of Zerubbabel in chapter 3.
Yeah, and they only talk to the elders of the Jews.
Right.
As if there's no
appointed governor.
Yeah.
And so the change from I'm so Passover, not from Pharaoh to Pharaoh, from king to king, in terms of who are the local appointed officials, and that's why it's quoted here from the appointed governors, but it's the Jews who are talking, who are saying that the story that happened is that Cyrus appointed Sheshbazzar, a descendant of David, to be the governor over this province. Now, that may not be where we are now, because Sheshbazzar is out of the picture, is gone and whatever else, but know that we came back under the flag of Persia, the official flag of Cyrus.
And it's even more confusing because in chapter 2 in Ezra, look at verse 2. Bao in Zerubbabel.
Yes.
So whoever put it together in chapters 1 and 2 in Ezra did a compilation of some generations all put together.
Correct. In fact, it's you're in the same place. If you jump right above in the last verse of chapter 1 to the first verse of chapter 2, you go from Sheshbazzar to Zerubbabel.
To Zerubbabel, as if it's all one big caravan.
Correct.
And there's at least 20 years separation between them.
Or confusion as to who
Very
really
confusing.
was. Or people laying claim as to who it was.
That's why when we read it, we kind of...
All right, let's polish off chapter 5.
Yep.
Jackie, your verse 17.
And now, if it please the king, let the royal archive...
Oh, actually you're on 16, I think. I'm sorry.
16. Then came the same.
I think...
That's okay, it looks the same.
That same Sheshbazzar then came and laid the foundations for the house of God in Jerusalem. And ever since then it has been under construction, but is not yet finished. And now, if it please the king, let the royal archives there in Babylon be searched, to see whether indeed an order had been issued by King Cyrus to rebuild this house of God in Jerusalem. May the king convey to us his pleasure in this matter.
Good.
They are being so honest, it's amazing.
In which sense? Which part is amazing?
The whole thing. I mean, they give kind of verbatim, whatever, the report of the Jews.
Right.
And
so the governors of Persia are being...
and then they're...
Well, they're hoping that
there isn't anything like that. That the Jews were lying. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that when the kings changed, that the records got obliterated.
Right. And there's no sense of animosity. There's no sense. They're worried that it may or may not be the right thing to do, but there's not the sense of revolution.
No talk about the walls of Jerusalem,
correct.
Building the city, nothing. It's really the house of God that they're talking about.
In the context of the shifting of language from Persia to Babylon, in the days of one of these kings, what if it's there in the notes, I think it's in the days of Cambyses. I have no idea how to pronounce the Persian king's names. The second king of Persia. There's the beginning of a rebellion, a Babylonian rebellion. Mm-hmm. That is an attempt for the Babylonian kingdom to resurrect itself, to do so. And so, I forgot the author, I apologize, who puts the antagonism towards the project and the fear of rebellion in the context of a world in which Bavel is rebelling against the Persians, and puts this much more open, amenable, sort of administrative concern in a world where the rebellion of Babylon has been put down, and so the kingdom is much more secure. And it's fun, and if you want to follow the line, then it makes sense why it's reasserted that this is about the king of Babylon. It's the Persian Empire, clearly, but if there's no other Babylon and whatever else to call Cyrus the king of Babylon is to remember that, because everybody knows Cyrus is Persian, is that Bavel is part of the Persian Empire and not an independent other piece to it, and so forth. And so all of this by way of getting the building project back on and back going back and double checking to make sure the building permits were filed back in the days of Koresh. And in the next chapter, just to give you some idea of where we're going to finish building. We're going to dedicate the temple, but not at the time that everybody says we dedicate the temple. And we're going to celebrate Passover again. So it forms a nice, a nice frame for where hopefully we will be next. I don't know if we'll get to the end of chapter 6, but maybe if we start on time and don't have as many interesting stories.
I can't resist a little